Good evening. We are going to commence this hearing of the Water Parks and Wildlife Committee and establish our quorum. Please call the roll.
Huffman.
Present.
Fuller. Anderson. Arambula.
Here.
Berryhill. Blumenfield. Caballero.
Here.
De La Torre. Fletcher.
Here.
Gatto.
Here.
Lowenthal. Salas.
Here.
Yamada.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, we have a quorum, and we will begin with AB 1260, but I think our author, Assemblywoman Fuller, may be just outside the committee room, so let's see if we can get her. Jean, are you ready to present? Okay, great. All right. Good evening. It's not quite 2:30 in the morning.
Well, we'll see if we can get it over with before 2:30 in the morning. How's that?
We shall see. All right. So whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair and members, I'm here to present AB 1260. As you know, Water Code Section 153 authorizes the governor to appoint 9 members to the California Water Commission for 4-year terms, subject to confirmation by the Senate. The terms are staggered, with 2 terms expiring in the first year, 3 in the second year, and 2 terms expiring in the third and fourth years. Under current law, the terms of the members of the Commission are staggered, and several of the positions of the Commission would lapse in months of appointment. This measure provides that the term of any confirmed member of the California Water Commission with an unexpired term as of January 1st, 2011 shall expire on May 14, 2014. After that date, the statutory staggering of terms resumes among the 9 Commission appointees. The need for such a realignment of the terms of the Commission members is clearly necessary. Stability within the CWC, as it addresses a number of critical water infrastructure issues, particularly the development of criteria by which storage projects may receive state funding, and the selection of storage projects pursuant to the water bond. It is virtually important to maintain the cohesion and experience of the Commission members as these extensive multi-year processes move forward. So you will be hearing 1265, and that's what necessitates this need.
Okay, there's a motion by Mr. Anderson and a second by Mr. Fletcher. Please continue, unless you were done.
Oh, basically, unless you have questions, I just ask for your aye vote. We've all worked very, very hard on this issue, and I think we're at a place now where this is necessary to facilitate 1265.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Fuller. I do have a couple of questions just to lead off, starting with a question about whether, I know we're hearing 2 matters tonight and that they are related. Is there any contingent enactment language that we need to know about in either measure? No. So neither measure technically depends on the other.
That's correct.
All right, thank you for that. And I guess as a veteran of the same water drama that you've been through for the last over a year, I have one kind of overriding question. We obviously approved a measure that would go to the voters as part of the package last year, and that measure did rely on the California Water Commission to play a pretty central role. I would characterize it as a safeguard role to develop standards for how you define public benefits to make sure that projects aren't unfairly subsidized, that what the public pays for truly is public benefit instead of private gain with respect to the storage chapter. So it's a pretty critical role in terms of the comfort level that many of us got to support the compromise package. I don't know that that comfort level would have been the same had we known that this governor's appointees were going to have these extended terms, that we were hardwiring into the process, or basically we were blocking the next governor from having any say in the development of these public benefit criteria. So I'm very troubled, and I'm wondering, with respect to this almost unprecedented gift to an outgoing governor, I'm not aware of us ever doing anything like this, just sort of unilaterally extending the term of an outgoing governor's appointments. What policy does this advance? Because we always knew there was going to be a turnover in the commission. We always knew that some of these terms were going to begin to expire as soon as this coming year, before the public benefit criteria would be developed. And so suddenly, 10 months after the deal, we're handing the governor this extension of terms, and I just wonder, why are we doing this, and what policy does it advance?
Well, I think I'll be letting Doug add on, but for me, it's pretty obvious that we don't know who the next governor is, and we have a 50-50 chance here to worry about that policy when that time comes. Yes, there you go. But when we developed this bill, one of the things that we put in there in good faith is that there was an off-ramp for possibly pushing the bond back. And I think that, as we talked and we spent a lot of time trying to make the appointment process fair and sensitive to all that was here. And so for me, the policy that this really reflects is that the people that have been a part of the talks, who have been appointed now, are people who were intimately aware of all of the things that we've been doing. We're going to lose that sense of memory and that sense of history if we suddenly don't align with the pushback of the day. I think the other policy was that we were all assuming that this period of planning before we actually received the bond money would be with this group of people. And so by changing the date, I think we're just aligning the policies that we'd already created and that we'd already talked about. And it's not, for me, it's not so much about the people, it's not so much about the governor. Those are going to come and go, but it's about the alignment of the dates and the policy and the experience level and the sensitivity and being included in the group. And I'm sure Doug has a much more technical answer, but that's what it is for me.
All right. Well, thank you. And I just want to express my dismay at all of this in this bill, frankly, because this was not part of the deal that we put together last year. We always knew that these terms were staggered. We always knew they were going to begin to expire starting in January of the coming year. So it was never guaranteed that this governor would be able to appoint every single commissioner that gets to decide this crucial issue of public benefits. And what we are doing, if this bill passes, is quite literally prohibiting the next governor from having any say in the matter. And I think that is an overextension and, honestly, an overreach from where we left off in the delicate compromise of last year. So that is my view. I'm sure other members of the committee have questions or thoughts. Yes, Mr. Anderson.
I think you make an excellent point. I think that's one of the arguments that many people are using for why this bond should not be delayed. It should be voted on now. And I do think, though, if there's any type of delay, you want that continuity of thought, and is that part of the strategy, is to have the continuity, because the new governor, and frankly, I don't think it matters what it is not going to understand everything that was put into all the delicate negotiations. Is that part of the strategy? I mean, is that what your thinking is?
Well, back, as the chair referenced, when the original bill language was put together, as he rightly points out, everyone knew that those terms were going to be staggered. It was not believed at the time, nor do I think, Mr. Chair, do I believe that this is an issue of which governor gets to make the appointment, because the legislature in these appointments is an equal partner. This legislature approves or confirms those appointments. And so there isn't an absolute edict given to the governor unchecked in any of these appointments. And so giving the commission, the thought being here in this bill, is giving the commission that full measure with the legislature's acquiescence to begin to work the process of developing those regulations that develop or determine public good and all the other matters you referenced. That, I think, is the logic that kind of goes to the addressing of what was behind the original thought or the original deal. In looking at it, obviously, there needs to be that continuity. But there's no favoring any particular governor, because the next governor will still, based on the trigger line in this, have a say in the appointments on that commission.
Mr. Fletcher.
So I think my first question you addressed, which is all of them require Senate confirmation, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, my second question, if I read this correctly, so the terms of all 9 members will expire on May 14, 2014?
Correct.
And so then the next governor would appoint a new entire set of 9 members?
And then the staggering will go back into effect.
And so then the staggering will start after the next governor appoints them
Right.
in 2014. And so you could potentially in 2014 have a complete turnover.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that complete turnover, then you would start the staggering process brand new.
Correct. Assuming that the next governor, whoever that is, clears the current commissioners out and appoints new ones.
Okay, but the next governor would be able to appoint the entire
Yes, sir.
group. Okay, thanks.
Mr. Berryhill, did you have your hand up? No, I didn't. Okay. Ms. Yamato.
Thank you, Chair Huffman. Assemblymember Fuller, could you or maybe the staff could clarify, would this be the first time that the legislature took an action like this in terms of extending a particular commission's appointments?
To my knowledge, it is.
So from that standpoint, there's no precedent, so this would be precedent setting.
Yes.
And secondly, I did want to clarify for some of my colleagues that, when appointees are named by the governor subject to Senate confirmation, it is my understanding that they can serve up to a full year without Senate confirmation. So just because it states in the analysis or in anything that you've ever read that appointments are subject to Senate confirmation, that is correct. But there's no requirement that the appointee be confirmed until 365 days or so are passed. Now, of course, I would not doubt the motives of any of my Senate colleagues, but I would be very concerned about supporting, number one, a policy precedent-setting activity as is reflected in this legislation, and secondly, the fact that it's pretty fuzzy as to what Senate confirmation actually means. So we don't know who Senate leadership is going to be. We don't know who the governor is going to be. And if you were all to use the logic of continuity, we need only look inside our own houses to know that there's very little continuity, within our own ranks. So I think that it's very important for us to look at this measure in totality. And, for these and many other reasons, I will be unable to support your bill today. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Berryhill.
Yeah, this seems to me, aren't we talking about intent and fairness in this? I mean, to me, as we've negotiated this thing for how many years, it seems to me that this is kind of an intent and fairness issue, and let's let the people that are put on this board serve on it. And I don't know if I've got this thing wrong on this deal, but isn't that basically what we're asking for, Ms. Fuller?
Yes.
Well, then I will have no problem backing this this vote today.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from members? Ms. Cambier, did you? Yeah.
I wasn't sure there was an answer to the serving a year without the necessity of a Senate confirmation. I was wondering if you could. It looked like you were going to answer that question, then it wasn't asked as a question. So could you please answer that?
Well, Ms. Caballero, as you're well aware, and Ms. Yamato's point is very well taken, there is nothing in statute that requires within 60, 90, or 120 days. It's the will of the body. And if, as the chair and others have pointed out, that these appointments are vital and important and of great concern, there is no ability in statute to mandate that the body operate on a particular schedule. That's up to you as members to do. And I would hope that, and I believe that the intent is that the body will, once this statute goes into effect and aligns all of these appointments, there will be sufficient gravity attached to them that those hearings will occur. I mean, we've seen similar actions in the Delta Stewardship Council. There has been no one-year delay in many of those appointments. And so I don't know how you legislate the legislative interest in ensuring that those confirmations move in an expedited or in a quick manner. That can't be addressed in the bill.
Why don't we go to witnesses that may be here in support of AB 1260? Witnesses in support, please come forward.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Ron Davis with the Association of California Water Agencies. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. The Association of California Water Agencies is here today to support Ms. Fuller's measure, AB 1260. We think it's very important to move forward with the appointees that have been made with a very important responsibility found in Chapter 8 to establish the regulations for determining what the public benefits are going to be for storage projects that would be funded out of that package. And this is going to be one of the really most important assignments that the long-standing California Water Commission has ever had. So it's going to be key to bring in appropriate people, which we think the governor has done, that will establish the continuity to provide well-reasoned decisions for coming up with how to protect and the public investment and the private investment in Chapter 8. Therefore, we support the measure.
All right, thank you. Next witness in support.
Mr. Chairman, Danny Curtin, California Conference of Carpenters, members of the committee. I want a full disclosure. I've been appointed to this commission, so I would strongly encourage your support for this bill. I do think...
Have him appoint you to one of the 4-year slots. How's that?
I'm fine with that. I'll be fine with 20 minutes, to be honest with you, the way things are going. But the fact that the commission stopped functioning has sort of led to we need to take a whole nother look at how these appointments are going forward, and the idea that the Senate still will have ultimate say. And I'm not sure, somebody said, does the Assembly review these appointments as well? I don't think so. Okay. So the Senate has a full review of this, and they have a year to look, and at any time they can knock somebody off. So there's still plenty of flexibility, and I would encourage your support.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask witnesses to be as brief as possible. We won't use any arbitrary limits unless necessary, but
thank you,
need to
Mr.
keep
Chairman. Kathy Cole of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, in support of the bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Jonathan Clay, San Diego County Water Authority, in support.
Mr. Chairman, members, Jose Mejia, California State Council of Labor, is in support of the measure. Also in support of Danny. I have to say that. Jim Kremens, operating engineers, in support of myself and Jubs. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll let him take cuts. Mr. Chair, thank you. Jim Arp with the California Alliance for Jobs. And we don't really care that much about Danny Curtin, but this is a good bill. So we do support you. We encourage you to support it. Thank you.
Danny Merkley with the California Farm Bureau, in support.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members. Glenn Farrell with the Bryant Water Authority, in support.
Mr. Chairman, Richard Harris on behalf of the California Water Association, in support.
Mr. Chair and members, Dave Puglia, Western Growers Association, in support.
Dennis Albee on behalf of the Hay-Mclusa Canal Authority, the California Grain and Feed, and California Seed Association. Support.
Ooh. Chairman and members, Christopher Trinell here on behalf of Audubon, California, and the Nature Conservancy, in support.
Valerie Nair for the California Chamber of Commerce, in support.
Crystal Jack on behalf of California Citrus Mutual, California Cotton Growers and Ginners Associations, Nisei Farmers League, and others, in support.
Thank you.
Brenda Quintana on behalf of the California Latino Water Coalition, in support.
Steve Cruz, California Building Industry Association, in support.
Keith Dunn, in support of the American Council of Engineering Companies.
All right, very good. Certainly, you want to do it now? Or witnesses in opposition, please come forward. Are there any witnesses here in opposition? I don't see any, so Ms. Salas, now would be a good time to make a comment.
Well, I understand that there's some discomfort that this sets a new precedent relative to changing the terms and having a governor have the potential ability to make the full appointments of the body. But as someone who has worked on the working group to make sure that we got the bond all together and put forward, it took a tremendous amount of effort and compromise on the part of everyone. And so if AB 1265 is successful and we're moving the date of the bond from 2010 to 2012, then I think that the situation that we're in and the absolute necessity for us to address the crisis that we're facing in water means that we have to have a commission that's really there, that will really be able to study the matter and make the long-term recommendations and decisions that have to be made to move the bond work forward. So for that reason, even though there are some downsides to this, some precedents that we're uncomfortable with, I will be supporting this bill.
All right. Any other questions or comments of members?
Mr. Huffman,
Yes,
I apologize. I forgot to ask this question. What is the situation with regard to reappointment of members? In other words, this bill is about extending appointments to 2014, but has there been any discussion about, no one is arguing that continuity is a bad thing, but I think some precedent setting for me is. Why would these same individuals not be subject to reappointment if they're doing a good job?
Oh, they absolutely would be, Ms. Yamada. They are all eligible if they're serving on the commission at the time. Whichever governor is in place, he could continue their appointment.
He or she.
He or she. I'm sorry.
But that's okay. He is fine with that.
I didn't think you would be. I didn't think you would be displeased.
All right, members. We have a motion and a second. I just want to state for the record that I will be opposing this measure. This was the most difficult part of the water package for me last year, the bond. May be the most difficult vote I've ever cast, part of a hard compromise, and we'll talk about that more in a moment, I'm sure. But the Water Commission's role in developing public benefit criteria with integrity to prevent abuses, to make sure projects competed on the merit for public dollars, was critical, very material piece of getting me to the point where even stretching my sensibilities, I could make the compromise and vote for this. And unfortunately, I see this as a pretty material departure from the kind of independent commission which I had thought would include at least an appointee or two from the next governor, which went a long way in terms of checks and balances in my view. So unfortunately, this touches on a very material item that influenced my position last year, and I cannot support it tonight. Please call the roll.
Concurrent Senate amendments. Huffman.
No.
Huffman, no. Fuller.
Aye.
Fuller, aye. Anderson.
Aye.
Anderson, aye. Arambula. Arambula, aye. Berryhill. Berryhill, aye. Blumenfield.
Aye.
Blumenfield, aye. Caballero. Caballero, aye. Dilatori. Fletcher.
Aye.
Fletcher, aye. Gatto.
No.
Gatto, no. Lowenthal.
Aye.
Lowenthal, aye. Salas.
Aye.
Salas, aye. Yamada.
No.
Yamada, no.
All right, that bill is out. We are going to, I'm sorry? Okay, the committee concurs in Senate amendments. We're going to go to AB 1265, and Ms. Caballero, are you presenting? Okay, great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Thank you for the opportunity to present AB 1265 here before you tonight. Not a happy camper, so to speak. I did not believe we'd get to this day, but a necessary camper. It has become very clear that this recession that the state of California is in is prolonged, that we're not out of it yet. and that given our budget situation, anything on the ballot this year that would require the expenditure of resources or the commitment to expend resources would probably not be very successful. And so after much discussion and analysis, it became very clear that the governor and leadership was interested in delaying the vote on the water bond to 2012. And so AB 1265 seeks to address that particular issue. I'm very pleased to say that AB 1265 is very, very simple. It changes the date from 10 to 12, and it has one other addition, which is a bill that the chair authored. And frankly, I would have preferred it not to be in the bill, because then I could have just said it's just the date, which really makes it simple. But in the wisdom of others, AB 2775, which is authored by Assemblymember Huffman and Senator Cogdell, and I want to thank you for your work on that, because after we passed the bond, it became very clear that there were conditions in the bond that made the expenditure of resources in a JPA for the purposes, which allowed private companies to benefit from, was problematic. And so you did take it upon yourself to meet with Senator Cogdell and to work on a bill that would delete that particular opportunity. And so it is included in the language in this bill, and so there are two things that it does. One is it changes the date, and two, it incorporates the AB 2775 in the bill. So it's very simple, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
All right, thank you, Assemblymember Caballero. Why don't we go ahead and hear from witnesses in support at this time?
Mr. Chairman, pleasure to see you again. Danny Curtin, California Conference of Carpenters. You and I have spoken over the years on this issue. This issue is so complicated and so contentious. I don't think a perfect legislature, if such a thing ever existed, could put together a package that would satisfy everybody. But I think this legislature did a monumental thing when they put this package together. And because of the economy, because of a variety of maybe miscommunications, whatever, we're sitting here today pushing this back. It still is and still was a monumental accomplishment. I share your frustration. I fully respect your perspective on this. I'm also frustrated. But I think at this stage, this is actually absolutely the best option to push this back and fight another day and put together what is really a very good package, in spite of the flaws that may exist and what other opinions are about it. You can't get this legislature to do the kind of thing like this very often. This put pieces together that have not been put together in a long time, and if we could do this every once in a while, we'd all be proud of ourselves. So I encourage you to vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curtin. Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wholeheartedly endorse everything that was just said by Mr. Curtin. As co-chair of the effort to try to get this thing done, this bond means a great deal to not only me, but a lot of folks. A lot of folks sit around the table and everywhere else. We've worked on this for a long time, and as you all know here, this bill is not just a single standalone piece of legislation. It was part of a hard-fought compromise of a package of bills that do a lot of good things for California's, that will be able to do a lot of good things for California's water system. This provides vital funding for public benefit portions of infrastructure and environmental mitigation, delta restoration. A lot of important components rely on this bond to happen, and we feel that we need your support today to be able to roll this over to 2012. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, Ron Davis with the Association of California Water Agencies. We, too, support reluctantly. I couldn't agree more with both Mr. Curtin and Mr. Arp. The legislature put together a historic package last year. That entire package needs to move forward. Obviously, funding the public benefits portion of the package that was contained in SB X72 last year is an important critical component of that overall package. And we would love to have moved forward with it this year, but as has been indicated, the economy is just driving us in a different direction. So we would urge your aye vote today as well.
Mr. Chairman, members, Jose Mejia, California State Council of Laborers. I think the Assemblymember Ana Caballero basically said it very well when she first opened up in her remarks by expressing their desire rather not to go this route, but due to the current circumstance, I think it's inevitable that it's probably the right thing to do, and I urge this committee to please support the efforts of moving in 2012.
Mr. Chairman, members, Jack Walco with the Gualco Group on behalf of the California Council for Environmental and Economic Balance and the Kern County Water Agency, also in support of the delay. Thank you.
Darla Ginsler, California Council of Land Trust, in support of the bill.
Mr. Chairman, members, Dave Puglia, Western Growers Association, also in support of the bill.
Dennis Albiani, California Grain and Feed, California Seed, and the Tehama-Clusa Canal Authority in support of postponement. Thank you.
Tim Kremens and Operating Engineers in full support.
Brenda Quintana, California Latino Water Coalition, in support of the bill.
Valerie Nero for the California Chamber of Commerce, in support of the bill.
Jeremy Smith on behalf of the State Building and Construction Trades Council, also in support.
Danny Merkley, California Farm Bureau, in support.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members. Glenn Farrell with the Bryant Water Authority in support.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Keith Dunn on behalf of the American Council of Engineering Companies and California Apartment Association, in support.
Crystal Jack on behalf of the Nisei Farmers League, California Cotton Growers and Ginners Associations, California Citrus Mutual, and others in support.
Thank you.
Jennifer West on behalf of the California Municipal Utilities Association, in support.
Chairman, members, Christopher Trinnell on behalf of Audubon, California, and the Nature Conservancy, in support.
Mr. Chairman, Richard Harris on behalf of the California Water Association and Water Reuse California, in support.
Jonathan Clay on behalf of the San Diego County Water Authority, in support.
Kathy Cole on behalf of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, in support.
Steve Cruz, California Building Industry Association, in support.
Casey Elliott on behalf of the Municipal Water District of Orange County, in support.
All right. Any other witnesses in support? All right. Witnesses in opposition, please come forward.
Mr. Chair, committee members, my name is Jim Metropolis. I represent the Sierra Club. We're here today in opposition to AB 1265. We actually believe the bill should be amended to repeal the water bond. It's time to start over. We should look at spending the previous bond funds that have been approved by the voters but have yet not been appropriated by this legislature. We have billions of dollars in water projects already approved by the voters that have not been spent. Furthermore, we should look at user fees and having the project proponents pay for their projects. Interesting idea. One of the speakers mentioned that this bond should pay for environmental mitigation. Really, shouldn't project proponents pay for those projects that are impacting the environment? It was great to see that parade of people looking for a handout from the state. I think that we should oppose this bond, repeal it, and start over. Ask for your no vote.
Thank you. Next.
Mr. Chairman, members, David Wolf here with the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. We're opposed to the bill. I want to make a quick note here to start out. We were not opposed to the bill 45 minutes ago in Senate Natural Resources, and we weren't opposed to the bill because I didn't have authorization at that point to oppose it. Okay. I do now. Let me make it abundantly clear, members. HJT has opposed the water bond, Prop 19, on the November ballot, and so too we must oppose this bill. Delaying this bond, Mr. Chair, delaying it to 2012 won't make it any better. It won't. It does not deflect and disguise from what this bond really is. There is at least $3 billion worth of pork in this bond that will not bring new water to the citizens of California. There is at least $3 billion in water storage projects that are supposed to be dedicated to surface storage that may or may not be used for surface storage, that may or may not be used for new dams, that may or may not be used for new reservoirs. that may or may not be used to keep water from flowing out to the ocean instead of into the households of Californians that desperately need it. It's not there. The California public, Mr. Chairman, quite frankly, deserves better than an $11 billion pork bond. Deserves better than that. It deserves better than, by the year 2014, to have a debt service ratio of 10% in the state that's being dedicated to pay off bonds. Listen, we've approved $100 billion worth of debt this decade. That's $200 billion by the time you factor in the interest. We simply can't afford this bond with 50% of the budget going to education, with 20% going to health and human services, with 10% going to the aforementioned bond debt, with 6% going to unfunded pension liabilities. That's 90% of the budget that's tied up. That's $800 million just off of this bond alone in bond debt interest that is constitutionally obligated to be paid off before any other programs can be funded. That means higher education, which does not have a constitutional mandate. That means a lot of corrections programs that can't be funded. We need to prioritize our spending, and we'll prioritize our spending by opposing this measure, opposing this bond, and recrafting it to make sure, again, that we get water into the households of California. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tina Angelino with the Planning and Conservation League, and I'll keep it very brief, concurring with the previous two speakers, but I just want to point out two problematic provisions of this, well, three actually, of this bill and why we have to oppose it. I'm trying to keep it to only three. First and foremost, AB 1265 does not correct the problems in this bond. It simply delays it, and this bond will not get better. It will not age well with time. It'll still be the same poorly supported bond in 2012. It just delays any progress on meaningful water solutions. Second, we don't feel that the JPA amendment goes far enough. It only applies to Chapter 8 of this bond. You can still have water privatization coming in at other parts if this bond is approved by the voters. Simply delaying it does not solve that problem. Three, the delay only applies to when the measure is put on the ballot, not all of the dates in the ballot. So there are dates related to the Water Commission and when they have to do work and when they'll have to promulgate regulations. They'll have to begin working on those regulations before the voters have even had a chance to vote on this up or down, which means if they vote it down, which polls show that they are very likely to do so, all that work will be for naught. So we think that this is a very flawed measure. We know you're voting on concurrence. We urge a no vote.
All right, thank you.
Vern Gehring, representing three organizations in opposition to this measure before you: the California Native Plant Society, the California Sea Urchin Commission, representing commercial fishermen around the state, and Food and Water Watch. Just very briefly, we asked what's changed since the fall of 2009 when this bond measure was first passed. The budget's still in the dumpsters. The economy is still struggling. But what's changed is the governor and many in the legislature have just recently realized that the public doesn't support the $11.5 billion bond measure. Yes, we realize the public's in a cranky mood, but this measure is akin to gaming the stock market. Only in this case, we're gaming the voters. We ask your no vote.
All right, thank you. Any other witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, let's come back to the committee. I have a question, Ms. Caballero, that I think is probably the central question in this debate. Others might disagree, but I think we have to ask, why is the bond in trouble in terms of keeping it on the November ballot, and why do we believe that extending it to 2012 is going to make anything better?
Well, thank you for asking that question, and let me be very clear. I haven't seen anything that says the bond's in trouble.
Well, the governor says it's in trouble.
Well, and you know, if you believe everything the governor says, I've got a bridge in Brooklyn I can sell you as well. I think, quite frankly, what I hoped in being one of the co-authors of the bond back in November is that the economy was starting to turn around and that we'd be in a little bit better position today than we are. In particular, that our budget would look a little bit better than it is today. You know, there have been allegations of gaming the voter, and frankly, offended by that, because I think, from my perspective, what we want to be able to do is have a fair shot at explaining to the voters what priority water fits in within all of the priorities that we have here at the state, because that's part of the job that we have in convincing the public that this water bond is an important component of what we need to do to fix our infrastructure. So public education is very important. And quite frankly, I'm not in a position to be able to say that we've done everything we could to raise the money to be able to do the public education, to be able to get out in front of the voters. And with everything that's gone on this year, it's been a tough year. Will it be better in 2 years? It's my hope that it will. Frankly, this was the same kind of decision that we made when we were talking about high-speed rail. That got delayed a couple of times, if I recollect correctly, at least once that I had to vote on. And so what you try to do is to pick a time when the economy is at your back, so to speak, and you have the wind at your back, and you have a better opportunity of being able to get your message out. And I think, that's what a ballot measure is all about. That analysis goes into a lot of ballot measures, and it's not an issue of trying to trick the voters. It's an issue of informing the voters, and that's really why the date has shifted a little bit. And I think we had a premonition that we might need to do this when we passed this back in November. But I guess we're all optimistic, hoping that we'd see the end of this recession and be in a better economic situation.
Well, I don't know if, unless we're using the royal we, I'm not sure if I agree. Because one of the things that brought this yes vote to the difficult position of putting this before the voters this fall was that it would be resolved. And the voters would have a chance to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and we would move on either way. If it passed, we would get to work on making it work. And if it failed, we'd get to work on a different measure. But it seems to me that it's a very different proposition to have something as comprehensive as our statewide water infrastructure planning kind of suspended for over 2 years, while we wait for the mood of the electorate to line up. I don't think that was ever part of my consideration, but it may have been something other people thought about. I can't speak for them. Mr. Berryhill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is more of a comment, I suppose, than anything else. But I just want to remind everybody here that as we were putting this whole bond together, I think everybody understood that we sit here today in this state with infrastructure for about 18 million people. Well, the reality is we've got 40 and growing. So I think that as we all look, and Mr. Chairman, you and I, 4 years ago, talked about water rights, talked about continuous appropriation. Man, we were so far apart back in those days that, we just couldn't get there. Well, that's in our lifetime in the legislature. Dave Cogdill, these guys have been working on this thing for 10 years, been negotiating this for 10 years. Now, nobody wants to put this thing down the road, but the reality check here is this economy, just, in all good conscience, we should be delaying this thing a little bit. An argument of, this economy isn't going to be good for the next 2 years. Maybe it isn't. But, as Ms. Caballero mentioned, with high-speed rail, we certainly waited a couple different times till the wind was at our backs and that it was economically feasible to go ahead and do so. So I think, as we move forward, I think in all good conscience, if we don't move this thing and give this thing a chance down the road, I don't think that you'll see water storage in this state, legitimate water storage language, for another 40 years. And for me, I think that is too critical for our kids and our grandkids. And it's certainly for those reasons, I'll be voting for this measure.
Thank you. Assemblymember Blumenfield.
I don't get to say this often enough, but I think Mr. Berryhill hit the nail on the head, and that we do need, our infrastructure needs are such that we really need to take that into consideration and move this forward. So, agreeing with Mr. Berryhill, I support this measure.
Other members of the committee, questions or comments? Yes, Mr.
Just one quick comment, Mr. Chair. I know a lot of people have worked on this issue for a lot longer, certainly than I've been in the legislature, but coming here asking for this committee and sitting through all of last year and a few of the working groups, you realize the complexity of the water issue and you realize the challenges that come with it and the problems that come with it. And while no solution is ever going to satisfy anyone, I just think so we're all kind of clear, there's not another bond that's coming. It's not like you just magically start over, right? Because so much of what's in this bond, as the chair pointed out, was tied to the various different policy pieces that were a comprehensive fix. So if you didn't get what you wanted in the first bond, and it's either too much or too little, it's not like we just magically come back next year and say, okay, let's start over again. This has been a fight for 40 or 50 years. And I think to that end, taking a 2-year pause to say, maybe it won't be better, but maybe it will. And we think that the final piece of this agreement, most of the pieces of which have already been signed into law, but a part of that agreement was that the bond would go before the voters with a reasonable chance to be passed. And I think, delaying it 2 years is certainly reasonable to give a better chance to build a coalition to educate voters and perhaps be in a better position in our state. So I think it's entirely reasonable. And for anyone that opposed the bond the first time, I understand why you'd oppose moving it. But if you supported it in the first place, I think it's just entirely reasonable to try and complete the comprehensive package that was put before us. But just so we're all clear, it's not like we come back next year with the policy pieces having already been signed into law and magically start over on negotiations on what you would like or wouldn't like in the bond. That debate's already happened. So I'll be supporting this, and I think it makes sense.
All right, Mr. Anderson.
I guess I'm a little confused. It strikes me that at the base of all this, the purpose of the bond was to deliver water, and that we were delivering water because there's a need for water in the Central Valley for jobs, a need for water in Southern California for biotech, a need for water all over the state in a distribution policy and in addressing all this. So we worked really hard to pull all this stuff together, and I get it took 40 years. I get everyone put it in. But at the end of the day, it wasn't because of the negotiations. The negotiations were there so we could deliver water so more Californians would have private sector jobs, that people would be able to show up. And there would be farm work. There would be biotech jobs. There would be high-tech jobs. They still need these jobs. They still need that water to roll. And, I have to ask you, we had some other examples. High-speed rail. It was delayed once. It was delayed twice. So how long are we prepared to delay this? Water bonds are always a hard sell. It doesn't matter. There are more people unemployed now than ever before in our state. If we can't sell a water bond now, no amount of money is going to sell it in the future. And to delay this, right now we're saying 2012. It could be that I'll never see a vote on this in the time that I'm in the legislature. I won't be supporting your bill, not because I don't agree with what you're trying to accomplish, but I can't turn my back on all those people that are counting on those jobs. I can't turn my back on all that stuff. And I was a no vote initially. I was a no vote because I thought that Lucy was going to pull the football. And today, Lucy's pulling the football. And it's not you personally, and I'm not going after you, but this is the kind of politics that takes 40 years to overcome. I'm willing to work in my district to deliver that water. I'm willing to work in other people's to make those arguments because I think that people fundamentally get it. I don't think you need a lot of money to sell this bond. I think that you just need people who are unemployed to show up and vote. And for that reason, I won't be supporting it today. I think that we still have the need, and delaying it reminds me of the person that gets injured. So we call 911 to get the services and you know what, I hate to do this to you. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm going to start over. It's like calling 911 because someone's having a heart attack and then telling them to take side streets to get there. Our state is having a heart attack. We need that water. We need it now. And I can't delay it any further. Thank you.
Did you want to speak, Mr. Tillotson?
Yes, just really briefly. I think the dynamic has changed in the last 12 months, where the federal government has changed their attitude and has been working with folks, particularly in the Central Valley, on the water allocations and what they're doing in the Central Valley. I think the fact that this was approved by the legislature changed the dynamic. It showed that California was serious, and things have moved forward. This, what we thought was the linchpin of it, is now going to be the I don't know, the icing on the cake. We thought this was going to lead it. It turns out that probably is not going to happen. It's going to be what comes after to build our infrastructure over the long term. In the short term, what we're doing in the state with the water project, with the great rains we've had and the snowpack and the negotiations with the federal government have all improved in the last 12 months. And so that buys us this time that we need to do the long-term investments, and I'm going to be supportive of this.
All right, any other members of the committee would like to? Yes, Ms. Yamato.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Caballero, thank you for bringing this bill forward. I don't think it's going to be any big secret across this dais that I will be unable to support this bill to postpone, and I'll just clarify why. For actually two counterintuitive reasons for both deficiencies and excesses. To me, this bond was deficient in terms of process. As the Delta representative on this Water Parks and Wildlife Committee, I know you've all heard it before, but I'll say it again, that the people of the Delta, we're really glad that you've all discovered us and that you find water conveyance and supplies for jobs and people to drink in Southern California. We applaud that. We support that. But we don't believe that a general obligation bond that will add an additional $800 million to an already overburdened debt service in this state, whether it's done now or in 2012 or, perhaps we'll find another legislature in 2014 saying, well, wow, we don't know if this is going to go in 2012. Maybe we should wait till 2014. I would certainly be more prone to offering a substitute motion tonight to say that we ought to repeal the bond and start over. And let's get working on a real solution to the water supply and preservation of the Delta issues. If I hadn't sat all night long on, I believe it was November 3rd, on the assembly floor, receiving text messages at times asking me what was it that I wanted out of this bond. How much money do you want? What would it take for me to vote yes? And I know I didn't get them from you.
Not from me.
No, I
so
understand
people are
that.
very clear.
Yeah, I understand that. They weren't coming from you. Mm-hmm. But what I would say is this, is if we were to half this bond, to cut this bond in half and make it a revenue bond, I would have been able to support it. But out of $11.14 billion, for $2.5 billion of it to be attributed to Delta Solutions with a 50% match is just not something that the Delta communities can support. So I do want to clarify, indeed, that those messages were not coming from Ms. Caballero, but let's just say that the entire process of the development of this bond and the addition, every hour of additional hundreds of thousands, tens of millions, an additional billion overnight just speaks to the fact that this bond, as well-intentioned as it might have been, is not the answer to preserving the Delta or establishing a reliable water source for the rest of California. So with that, I'll be voting no today.
Thank you, Ms. Yamada. For the record, there has not yet been a motion, unless I'm mistaken, on this measure. I see a motion by Vice Chair Fuller and a second by Assembly Member Salas. So I think we've reached the end of the debate. Would you like to close, Ms. Caballero?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity for everybody to have an opportunity to speak. Members, we heard many of the same arguments that have been made during the debates on the merits of whether we should have a bond or not. And quite frankly, this is a very, very, very simple bill. And Mr. Chair, I understand your position in terms of thinking that if we don't get it over in 2 years, that there's somehow a liability. And frankly, I just don't see that anything gets delayed with the exception of the drought relief. And that drought relief was put in specifically to get some assistance to the communities that have been tremendously impacted by the lack of water. And that definitely gets delayed. But apart from that, when you take a look at all of the benefits that are in the bond, and I know that there's objections to process. Frankly, we spent countless hours of hearing. We had the bill in print for a long period of time. All of those are still with us, and people still have hurt feelings about it. The bottom line is that we came together in a historic fashion. We looked at all the needs of all the hydrological regions, and that's why the bond is written the way it is. And the only thing we're doing with this bill is changing the date and dealing with the issue of the JPAs. That's it. There's nothing new added to it. So it's very simple. If you think it was important, and Mr. Anderson, I thought you were making the argument for why we should delay this. Quite frankly, this is about putting people back to work, and it's about getting them water. And it doesn't become any less of a need 2 years from now. And to not give us an opportunity to have the best chance of being successful, I think would really, for a bad pun, flush away a lot of work that people did over the past number of years trying to create a comprehensive package that dealt with all of the issues that were of concern. And so I respectfully ask for your aye vote. We can rehash the substance until we're blue in the face. We've done that before, but this really is just 2 years. Give us an opportunity to be able to do what we need to do in terms of the work that needs to get done when you put something on the ballot.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Caballero. So we have a motion and a second. I want to just personally thank you for your hard work on this issue going back many years. I've been there working with you and Mr. Berryhill and others, and I think there's nothing but good intentions and good faith behind this work, and I think there's been some great accomplishment during that period. But I reluctantly am not going to be able to support this measure tonight. And I just want to state that my concern as somebody who did vote to put this to the voters in November of 2010 is that one of the things that allowed me to be comfortable with putting it to the voters this year was because I think we do need a bond. I think there are some parts of this bond, for all its controversy, that are very important and that we need to get on with very quickly. We're going to need a couple $2 billion at least to restore the dying Delta ecosystem. We are going to need a major new investment in water conservation, in recycling, in groundwater cleanup and groundwater management throughout the state if we're going to reduce our dependence on the Delta and meet our environmental as well as our water supply goals. We're going to need $250 million to take out a dam on the Klamath River to potentially restore one of the largest salmon runs in the northwest United States. We're going to need a major new investment in North Coast salmon restoration and in all sorts of watershed priorities throughout the state of California. And we're going to need that integrated regional water management piece because there are places throughout the state of California that have priority projects that they've identified that provide multiple benefits that need to be moved forward. So I see tremendous need to do a bond. But I think if the message that we're getting is that it can't pass as structured and maybe that we don't have the urgency that we were led to believe we had last year, and suddenly we have 2 years to take a look at that. Maybe we ought to roll up our sleeves and work on a bond that might be more positioned for success because I want to succeed. For all the reasons that I just mentioned, I think we need a bond. We got some pretty pressing stuff out there. But I will tell you, Mr. Anderson really helped crystallize for me one of my concerns, and that is if we can put it over for 2 years, we can put it over for 2 more, and we can put it over for 2 more. And so suddenly, all of the urgency that makes me believe that we need to get on with some major investments in California. This bond's not perfect, but it did cover some important ground that I think is a priority. Maybe put in limbo, just like high-speed rail, over a number of elections. And to me, that's unacceptable, and that actually will have a paralyzing effect of stepping up and meeting our most critical priorities. So I'm willing to continue my commitment of last year. I'm willing to put this bond to the voters this fall, up or down, and then let's move on. I am unwilling to get on a potentially unending treadmill that I think will actually have an adverse effect on our ability to step up and solve water problems for the state of California. So that's why I will be opposing, unfortunately. So please call the roll.
Concurrent Senate amendments. Huffman.
No.
Huffman, no. Fuller.
Aye.
Fuller, aye. Anderson. No. Anderson, no. Arambula. Aye. Arambula, aye. Berryhill. Aye. Berryhill, aye. Blumenfield. Aye. Blumenfield, aye. Caballero.
Aye.
Caballero, aye. Delatorre. Aye. Delatorre, aye. Fletcher.
Aye.
Fletcher, aye. Gatto.
Aye.
Gatto, aye. Lowenthal.
Aye.
Lowenthal, aye. Salas.
Aye.
Salas, aye. Yamada.
No.
Yamada, no.
The Senate amendments are concurred in, and this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.